day-to-day interactions, primarily with the graduate student or postgraduate student who's supervising the student. So a lot of the work we do is experimental. It's a lot of hands-on. So a lot of that training, or the majority of the training, will come from the graduate student. But I meet with my graduate and undergraduate students regularly. We meet at least every other week, and then we have group meetings where everybody gets together every other week. And at those times, then, that's when I get updates. So I meet with the graduate student and the undergraduate student. The three of us meet and we discuss updates, progress since the last meeting, interpret data, problems have come up, troubleshoot, things like that, and then set plans for the next period. And so we do that regularly throughout the entire academic year. And then, I'm always available on email or open door policy, so I can interact with students or answer questions as needed. But for day-to-day, it's usually the graduate student who, frankly, they know the project better than I do, and they're technically better than I am, and so they're the ones that are really providing the hands-on training. But I do meet frequently in order just to keep up on the project and provide my input and guidance.
Okay, to be honest with you, there's no cut and dried approach. It's very much student dependent. We normally start off with, I give them some initial material to read, and they go away and look at that, and then we'll come back and come up with more firmer directions. Ideally, we meet, we start out with every 2 weeks. But the nature of Thesis is it's very bursty. Things don't get done typically, especially around midterm time. But then, there are also key times throughout the term where students do have lots of time and they can get lots of work done. Ideally, what I do is I leave it up to the student. I let them drive the timing for our interactions. And if they need a meeting, quite often you don't want them to spin their wheels for weeks on end. So it's I'm quite happy to meet with them as they see fit. The only danger with that is there's some students, they're shy by nature, and they're hesitant to approach you. And if you let them drive the process, you can be waiting quite a long time for a meeting when one should have happened quite a bit before that. So, as I say, it's student dependent. Some of them are quite good at driving the process and arranging their meetings. Some of a more firmer schedule is required.
Okay. Yes. Inevitably, the communication begins sometimes in the first week of September, but usually it's in the summertime or in the spring before that, which is wise to get initial start on things so the student can do the background reading necessary. Because, of course, when you're starting a thesis topic, particularly if it's one you're interested in, or indeed one that you're not interested in necessarily, but the professor's interested in, you need a lot of background to catch up on stuff. And you can read a lot in the summertime easily, that's not a problem. But then this term begins. So you've decided to do it, you're set up, the paper has been signed, on you go. The job now is for the student to learn the material that's necessary, which often involves trudging around to a number of University of Toronto's, 49 libraries I think we have actually, and so there's lots of different spots and places. I had one student one time that did an undergrad thesis on the design of her own leg and required geometry information about bones, and so she had a friend in medical science and borrowed the bone box temporarily because they weren't supposed to. That actually had real human bones, and it was kind of freaky actually. Probably you shouldn't run that actually, because you weren't supposed to do that actually. But in any case, we end up with the beginning of the term where students need to gather the information. At that stage, I'm not going to be with you in the library. And so there's less interaction at the very beginning of the thesis because the student is trying to figure things out. They'll often come by. What I recommend, let's answer your question more directly. I recommend that students meet with their thesis advisor once a week, usually at a regular time so the professor knows to be there and it's nice and organized. And the student's job is basically to summarize what's going on. Sometimes those meetings will be 2 minutes long and the student will say, you know what, it's midterm time, I didn't actually get much done last week, so that's fine. Other occasions they say, hey, look what I found. And they come in halfway through the week saying, look at this new information I found, which is great, is this going to be relevant? And I say, yeah. And so away things go. So the biggest mistake a student can make when doing an undergrad thesis is to assume that the professor is going to tell them what to do. And that's not what a thesis is for. A thesis is for the student to decide what to do. And so the student will then find the information and basically explain to the supervisor what has been found, what has been learned. Now, sometimes if you're using experimental methods in a lab, for example, you have to be trained properly, and that's more hands-on. But it's the job of the student to tell the supervisor what has been found. And the supervisor then helps guide things along, particularly if the supervisor has a lot of students, because there's only so much time to deal with. So for me, I meet with students basically once a week, sometimes on Friday afternoons, and we discuss what has been done in the last week. And that's often a 10-minute long discussion, and that's it.
So I appreciate meeting with the student, regularly, maybe every couple of weeks, but, brief meetings. I appreciate if the student comes well prepared, so that would involve, them taking the initiative to summarize what we talked about last time, what we agreed on last time they'd work on, give me a quick summary of like progress they've made on those items, and then before too long get quickly to the point where they're talking about specifically where I can help them, and recognizing there that, a 15 or 30-minute meeting is not the place for me to sit with them shoulder to shoulder and debug lines of code, but if they come again prepared with questions or areas where I can offer some direction, I mean that's what I look for, and a really positive engagement. We're both making good use of our time, and the students benefiting a lot from a lot of really short meetings. And I always advise the students to take the consistent approach. Some students listen and some don't, but I believe that it should be approached with the same level of seriousness that you approach any of your courses, or arguably even more. I think what happens as often as not is that the project's done over Christmas, over reading week, 80% of it done during those times. I think that's a bad approach, and I think the students should keep in mind that a reference letter from a thesis advisor is a really valuable thing. Not having a reference letter from a thesis advisor is a really sort of suspicious thing to have on a grad application, and even just a sort of mediocre reference letter from a thesis advisor is a negative thing, really. So it's really important, this opportunity you have to get connected with a faculty member, and the way to make the most of that is not to just prioritize a midterm above getting ready for that next meeting.
Thanks for watching. You might be interested in another video in this series, or you might want to watch the uncut full-length interviews with our instructors. To do this, select pause to stop the video, and then select on a button or an image.